Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Will Charlton. That's Anthony Balester. This is another episode of Forever Power 5. You can follow this show on Twitter and Instagram at FP5ETV and on TikTok at Forever Power 5, no caps or spaces, and Forever Power 5 on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. Follow Anthony at Balester555. You can follow Will at Will Charlton H13. I got that right?
Yeah.
Or on Instagram at Will Charlton TV. All right, I got that. All right. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow Zan at Zanbando99 on Twitter and Instagram. And you can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to you can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com. You can listen to Forever Power 5 wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, this show is presented, Forever Power 5 is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, so a lot to get to today. A lot of stuff, a lot with the new Week 14 playoff rankings.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say there's any real surprises with this. I wouldn't say there's any real surprises with these playoff rankings. Hold on. And basically, the way it is at this point for the committee is they're just basically setting the stage for certain scenarios, is how I would put it. And in fact, that's what they do every year. That's kind of what they do every year. It's just sort of setting the stage where it's like, okay, if this happens, how can we justify moving this team up or moving this team down? That's kind of what it is. What were your guys' thoughts on these initial reactions of these rankings?
Yeah, I honestly, I thought Miami was a little too high. I honestly think SMU at this point has a better resume than Miami. And for Miami to be 3 spots ahead of SMU, I think that's wrong. Outside of that, I know I've been saying it every week, Penn State versus Texas. I feel like, I'm not going to argue that anymore. You can go either way. But outside of the Miami thing, I think the committee got it right. There's a couple scenarios, though. I mean, a lot of people aren't, predicting this, but there's a potential that a Power 4 conference gets left out. Now, say if Arizona State goes out there and lays the egg to Arizona, and then they go and win the conference championship game, now you got a 3-loss Big 12 team. You have Tulane, who's in the American Conference, who's right behind them. Now, if Tulane goes out and wins, and they're only 1 spot behind Arizona State, there's a potential where the Big 12 champion is left out of the playoffs, and you got a Boise State, and you got Tulane in the playoffs, and the Big 12 is left out.
Can that happen?
I don't think that can happen.
Yes, again, it doesn't. It's not the 4 power conference. It's the highest ranked conference champions. If Tulane is ranked higher than the Big 12 champion, and so was the other 3 power conference champions and Boise State, then the Big 12 champion will not make the playoffs.
Wow.
Why did I think?
Interesting.
I must have had that wrong. I thought it was an automatic bid for any Power 4 conference champion. I don't know.
I guess
the 5 highest ranked conference champions.
That way then sometimes.
Oh, I is that true? I didn't know that. I thought they automatically got in, but just couldn't necessarily get the bye.
Huh.
So what would happen is, say if like Arizona State falls, now you got a 3-loss Arizona State team. Now they're automatically in the Big 12 championship, but they can lose to Arizona, then win the Big 12 championship. That's a 3-loss team. Tulane's sitting there with a 2-loss, and they're only 1 spot behind Arizona State as we speak. Now, what's going to help Arizona State is they're going to be able to play a ranked team in the Big 12 championship, where Tulane is probably going to play an unranked Army team. So that's not going to help their case too much. But that scenario is out there where a power conference team can be left out of this.
Wow.
Wow. Because Boise State and Army. Okay. So I think it's actually, I don't think that could happen.
Yeah, it could.
It could. It could.
I guess technically, well, but the way it works though is that it's the 5 highest ranked conference champions.
Yeah,
right?
the 5 highest rated, right? Yeah.
Okay.
That makes
So
sense.
basically, that means
That makes sense.
Boise State and Tulane could get in over the Big 12 champion.
Huh.
Yeah.
I see.
Wow.
Well,
that creates a pretty big loophole, I gotta say.
that would be a pretty wild scenario. It's also not something I want to see.
Well, because we were talking about that before we hopped on this, Nick. Like, how could Tulane get in? So now it's kind of nice how we kind of have like a kind of like an idea, I guess you could say.
Okay, so the way it works is that the 5 highest conference champions will receive automatic bids, which would probably mean Power 4, like
Right.
like which would probably mean that. So technically, it could happen, but it probably won't.
Right. Okay.
I mean, look, I can't stand. I've said this many times, and Anthony seems to agree with me that I don't like automatic bids. It is just a really dumb concept, I think, automatic bids. And now I understand people like one thing I noticed is that people often like criticize college football for not being more like college basketball. They're like, well, college basketball, they have automatic bids. And it's like, okay, well, they have 68 teams.
Tournament.
Right.
68.
They have, okay, like college basketball, they give you 68 teams. College football, I mean, was 4, but now 12. Way, way different than saying than in college basketball where you have 68 teams. So it's obviously a little bit different. And to me, it's just like it is fairly obvious that the conferences are very uneven. They are too uneven to actually in football for automatic bids to be justified. Like I don't like qualifiers. You know what I mean? Like I don't like qualifiers in all of this. Like I think the best teams. It should be the judgment of the best teams. I don't think there should be an automatic bid for group of 5 teams either. I don't think Boise State should automatically get in. I'm not saying they like a team like occasionally there's a team like Boise State or UCF was in 2017 where they were good enough to be a playoff team. That does happen occasionally, but usually there is no group of 5 team that realistically is a top 12 team even. Most year, more often than not, there is not. That's why I don't like automatic bids. But that would be a wild scenario. But there's no way that's going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen because Army already lost to Notre Dame. Tulane lost to Kansas State. And Kansas State, it's like, I don't think Kansas State is maybe a middle of the road Big 12 team, I would say, even though technically they can still make the conference championship game.
Which is hilarious. That Big 12
Honestly,
is
Nick,
wild right now.
I think what would happen in that scenario is I think Arizona State say if they lose Arizona, I think they'll drop below Tulane for 1 week. And then I think after Tulane beats Army and then Arizona beats a ranked team, either if it's Iowa State or somebody else, I think that'll push them back up probably ahead of Tulane again.
Yeah.
You're also assuming Tulane's going to beat Army.
Yeah, I mean they probably should. They probably should, right? Maybe.
Yeah, that I guess that could happen. I don't think it will though. I just the flip side though is who's the highest ranked Big 12 team right now? Is it Arizona State?
Yeah,
and
Arizona State, BYU, and Kansas State.
But the highest ranked Big 12 team right now.
The highest.
Arizona State at 16.
Arizona. Okay, so Arizona State at 16. Boise State is currently 11.
I think that's right for Boise State. I like where they're at. I mean, they've proven to this point that they kind of deserve to be right in that conversation. I generally think they are a top 12 team because I mean, Ashton Genty is the best running back in the nation. That's undisputable. But yeah. I think that Boise State they have the team to be able to at least compete against these top teams. We saw at the start of the year against Oregon. I will go back to something I've said like in this show before that Boise State arguably gave Oregon its best game of the season to this point. Arguably.
Ohio State probably gave them a better game.
Probably. I'm just saying arguably. You could make the argument they did.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is like Boise. I would say they gave them their second best game because Ohio State lost by 1 point. Yeah. And if Will Howard didn't lose track of time, maybe Ohio State could have won that game. If Dan Lanning didn't purposely leave 12 guys on the field, maybe Ohio State could have won that game, but I'd say probably their second best, their second toughest game was probably Boise State.
I guess also at that point, we weren't really sure like how legit Oregon was yet, were we? Because that was like after a game where they barely squeaked by Idaho, right?
Yeah.
So I guess at that point, it's kind of hard to. I mean, hindsight's 2020. Obviously, it's kind of hard to look back on that and say that Boise State gave Oregon it's arguably its toughest test of the season at this point.
Well,
but
the flip side is we didn't know how legit Boise State was either.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like they haven't lost since then. I mean, they've been challenged a little bit. They got challenged this past week, obviously a little bit against a really bad Wyoming team, but I don't know. I mean, because even in a game where it felt like they could let this one get away from them against San Jose State, they end up winning by 2 touchdowns. So I don't know. I mean, I think that obviously they are probably the most deserving of that fourth spot right now. That last bye, they probably are the most deserving team of that right now. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like if Arizona State keeps on winning and doesn't lose another game, you'll have to have the conversation of who is more deserving for that last bye. Because as of right now, Arizona State is playing some of the best football. Can I say in the country? I mean, Arizona State is rolling right now. And I have a feeling that if Boise State can't like win these final 2 against Oregon State and then whoever they play in the Mountain West Championship by convincing fashion, and Arizona State ends up running the table in the Big 12, I don't know. I feel like Boise State's probably missing out on that bye there.
Do you think that's going to happen though? Because in what scenario is Arizona State going to just jump Boise State?
I'm just saying, I'm just saying, if Arizona State keeps winning like they do, and they end up running the table in the Big 12, and Boise State isn't convincingly beating an Oregon State team who's 5-6, and then squeaks by a team in the Mountain West Championship game, I'm just saying you might have to have the conversation. Now, I guess that could happen. As of right now, Boise State's still the more deserving team, and that I will defend that. But I'm just saying the conversation could arise.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they were to play right now in a neutral field, I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona State was the favorite and went out and win it. It would just be really hard, though, because that loss that Boise State has is one of the best losses in the country. And it's just going to be hard for Arizona State to make up that ground and be able to pass them, even if they do look more impressive in their conference championship game. I think one thing that we were, kind of undecided on heading into this week is with all these SEC teams, who's going to be making and who's going to be left out? Well, now with all these SEC teams losing, now we have a scenario to where now Indiana is guaranteed to make it with their one blowout loss to Ohio State. And now we might have multiple ACC teams make it. I know a lot of SEC teams are probably looking like in the outside looking in. I don't think necessarily Alabama's completely out of it. There is a small chance Alabama can still make the playoffs. There are only 2 spots out of the playoffs, and they just need 2 upsets to happen. They need 2 of either Notre Dame to maybe fall to USC, and then they need maybe Miami to fall to Syracuse, or they need Clemson to lose to South Carolina. They need 2 of those 3 to happen. If that happens, Alabama can get one of those last playoff spots.
You're right. Alabama is technically not completely out of it. Now, I didn't totally give my thoughts on the rankings yet. I just want to go through that in a second. There are a few things about this that I think are a lot of it I don't exactly have a problem with. Texas, Penn State, all right, I guess you could argue either way with that. Neither of them have great resumes, and when both of them have played a top 5 team, or not a top 10 team, I should say, they both lost. The difference is Texas has been a little bit more dominant than Penn State, when Penn State struggled a little more. But I'll say I think it's a joke that Miami is at 6. Miami should not be at 6.
They're too high. They're too high.
Georgia should be ahead of Miami for sure. I think it's because the committee is just so record obsessed that Georgia lost 2 games and Miami lost 1 game, and therefore, and they're just paralyzed by that. Record is something I would look at, but it's not, to me, everything. I don't think record is everything. Miami's schedule has been way easier than Georgia's schedule. I mean, the difference in their schedules is like night and day. Miami lost to Georgia Tech. Georgia at least lost to Alabama and Ole Miss. They didn't lose to they didn't lose to a team like Georgia Tech. And Miami has had and Miami has had a lot of very unimpressive wins. They needed a miracle comeback to beat Cal, and
easily have 3 or 4 losses right now.
Yeah, they should though. They really should. And they also were very lucky that the refs overturned the call against Virginia Tech, and they could have lost that game too.
Mm-hmm.
So Miami has been a very shaky team, whereas I do think they should be behind Georgia and arguably even Tennessee. Arguably Tennessee.
What about SMU, Nick? Do you agree that Miami should be the highest ranked ACC team? Because like I said, I think SMU should be.
I don't think so right now. I don't think so right now. I like SMU more personally.
You know what? I don't know. That's kind of tough. I think SMU and Miami have similar schedules because SMU's had a lot of close calls too. But we don't talk about it as much because we don't expect them to be as good as Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, SMU they beat Duke by a point. They struggled against Boston College. What's that?
I think they've proven more than Miami has right as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I were gun to the head, I would put SMU ahead of Miami, and I would possibly even put Indiana ahead of Miami. But I can at least understand the logic of like Miami, Indiana, and and SMU all have similar sorts of resumes, as I would put it. I mean, different but similar. None of them none of them have strong strength of schedules. I mean, a lot of people are saying technically Indiana has a stronger strength of schedule than Miami and SMU, and that is true technically. Although I don't exactly look at the strength of schedule in terms of quantifying it. You know what I mean? It's like this mathematical equation of the records of the teams that you played. I'm like, okay, that doesn't really tell you that much. SMU and Miami both beat Louisville, which is honestly a better win than any of Indiana's wins. But Indiana also lost to Ohio State, and Miami lost to Georgia Tech. So what's worse, losing to Georgia Tech or losing to Ohio State? I mean, it's not even really arguable.
Answer's pretty clear.
Yeah, and not only that, but Indiana doesn't even really have any close calls. The closest call they had was Michigan, but that's because Michigan scored they scored a lot like late in the game, whereas Miami had a lot of close calls.
Lots.
So in terms of resume, I think that Indiana and SMU's resumes probably are better than Miami's.
Probably.
I think there's probably a little bit of brand bias involved too.
Oh,
because they're Miami.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not just brand bias, also the fact that they have a Heisman contender. I think that the committee tends to favor teams with star players over teams, especially star quarterbacks over teams that don't. And I also, like, people often talk about SEC bias, and I don't know. I suppose there is some truth to the claim of SEC bias. However, I think there's all sorts of biases involved. I mean, any sort of committee is going to have bias, right? Like all human beings operate on bias on some level. It's impossible not to.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's going to be some type of bias, but I think brand bias is much bigger than SEC bias. And there are also times when it's like, sometimes I see like the opposite of that, which is sometimes I look at the committee trying to like, if there really was so much SEC bias, I don't think Georgia would be the 7th ranked team. I think if anything, the committee is too record obsessed. I think they're too obsessed with the fact that Georgia has 2 losses and Miami has 1 loss. And by the way, Notre Dame's strength of schedule is also not good. It is worth noting that too.
And they have the worst loss in the country at this point now. People just kind of forget about that.
Yeah, they have a loss to Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
And I also, looking at the rankings, I don't think Alabama should be ahead of Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss should be ahead of Alabama. They beat Georgia much better than Alabama did. They beat South Carolina much better than Alabama did. The only thing is that they beat LSU by a lot, and LSU ended up beating Ole Miss. But overall, I mean, I think Alabama's losses have been much worse. I mean, getting killed by Oklahoma, their loss against Oklahoma was a lot worse than Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky. And at the time, Kentucky was playing fairly well.
That was also at home, though. It was also in Oxford. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But at the time, Kentucky was playing pretty well. Because they also had – was around the same time they almost beat Georgia.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, that was right after that, wasn't it?
But Alabama got killed by Oklahoma.
That's what's also so weird.
And also, I think the loss to Vanderbilt is worse than the loss to Florida. I would say that too. and Ole Miss lost to LSU, and Alabama lost to Tennessee. Both those are sort of similar types of losses, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess they sort of offset. I would have put Ole Miss ahead of Alabama. I think they're a better team. But when you look at this is the worst Alabama team since 2007.
Yep.
This is the worst Alabama team in 17 years. I mean, the only team that was ranked this low was the team 5 years ago when Tua was on the team and Tua got hurt and Mac Jones was the quarterback. But that's because of an injury. So it's a little different. This year they're fully healthy and they're ranked 13. But yeah, there are some paths for them to make it. But they're just going to need a lot of help. They're going to need a lot of help. They will. They're going to need a lot of help. They're going to need Boise. No, they're going to a few collapse. Like Notre Dame is probably going to. The most likely scenarios I would say would maybe be Miami losing to Syracuse and then losing in the ACC championship game, or Clemson losing to South Carolina. Basically, the ACC is going to have to implode. They're going to need the ACC to implode, or they're going to need Notre Dame. They're probably going to need the ACC to implode and Notre Dame to lose to USC. There's at least one of those. They're going to basically need two teams to lose badly. Like if Miami loses to Syracuse, then that leaves a spot for them, I guess. But Clemson Clemson would be in the ACC championship game. And it doesn't really change that much. So they're probably going to need Clemson and
scenario too, yeah.
Miami to lose.
That's an odd scenario too, yeah. Yeah. Huh.
Or they're going to need one of them to lose and Notre Dame to lose.
Right. Right.
And
they also could probably use Indiana to somehow collapse against Purdue, but that's just not going to happen.
That's the least likely thing to happen.
Yeah, that's also not.
What's the spread in that game?
Happen.
25 points?
If Purdue keeps that within 3 touchdowns, that should be a win to them. You might as well just give them the bucket.
Yeah, and also, too, I would say for Alabama, don't just automatically assume that they're going to win. They're going to have a really tough rivalry game against an Auburn team.
Yeah, you can't assume they're going to beat Auburn. You can't assume
Auburn's looking like a good team. They just beat Texas A&M in overtime.
You can't even assume they'll beat Auburn. It's a great point. It's a great point.
The truth is, Alabama is Alabama, objectively speaking, is more likely to lose to Auburn than Indiana is to lose to Purdue.
I mean, yeah.
They are. They just are. Yeah. Indiana's favored by 29. So they're way more likely to win than and I would say Miami is okay. So I would say Miami is slightly more likely to lose to Syracuse than Alabama is to lose to Auburn. And I think that Clemson is way more likely to lose to South Carolina than Alabama is to lose to Auburn. So it just, if you look at the scenarios that are most likely to happen, and SMU versus Cal, I could see SMU possibly struggling, but they're 2 touchdown favorites. So I would say Miami losing to Miami and Clemson. Actually, no. Sorry. Clemson and Notre Dame both losing is not very likely, but the most likely, and on top of Alabama beating Auburn, is the most likely scenario for Alabama to get into the playoff, is how I would put it.
Gotcha.
And look, Notre Dame's clearly a better team than USC, but would it not be the most Notre Dame thing if they had lost to Illinois early in the season, recovered their reputation and their season by being so dominant for the rest of the year just to lose to USC and not make the playoffs? Would that not be the most Notre Dame thing we've ever seen?
It would be the most Notre Dame thing ever. It really would be. It would be. I mean, I personally would find that really funny because I know Notre Dame has been just annihilating opponents, and frankly, they probably deserve to be where they're at right now. But like we mentioned, they still have the worst loss in the country. Yeah. What I found so funny at the time is like they ranked Northern Illinois just because they beat Notre Dame the week after. And now I don't even know what Northern Illinois' record is right now. I don't know if they're qualifying for a bowl game. Like I know it's not good. I think they're like 4-4 last time I checked a few weeks ago. And
they're playing terrible competition too.
Yeah, the MAC is not good. I mean, they lost. I remember. I'm pretty sure the game after they got ranked, they lost to Buffalo or something like that.
Yeah, they lost to Buffalo.
But yeah, I don't know. Notre Dame is. I mean, like I said, Notre Dame probably deserves where they beat. But to give my thoughts, I haven't.
And for Ole Miss, it's basically the same path as Alabama, except it's a little harder.
Probably need Alabama to lose to Auburn.
Not necessarily, but they're going to need that extra collapse.
They probably do, just based off the fact that the name itself. I mean, if it's 2 9-3 teams, if it's an Ole Miss or an Alabama, I think the name alone would propel Alabama to the playoff. If you get to a scenario where either of them could get in, is obviously.
Well, like I said, the two most likely scenarios for Alabama would be for South Carolina to beat Clemson, and South Carolina is only a 2.5 point underdog. Is only a 2.5 point underdog.
I think I like South Carolina in that game too, but we'll get to that.
Well, we're going to get into it. But yeah, they're only a 2.5 point underdog, and Notre Dame are 7.5 point favorites against USC. So based on probability, those two teams are most likely the teams to lose.
Right.
Alabama's not. Look, Ole Miss is not going to jump Alabama if they beat Mississippi State, who is like the Purdue of the SEC. They're the worst team in the SEC, opposed to Alabama beating Auburn. Auburn's not good either, but Auburn's certainly a lot better than Mississippi State. And so they're going to need that to happen. They're going to need South Carolina to beat Clemson, Notre Dame to beat USC, and then Miami to lose to Syracuse. That would be the most likely scenarios to happen. All three of those things happening, by the way, would be pretty wild. I don't think any of that. I don't think that's all going to happen. But that would be the most likely scenario, is how I would put it. I mean, Miami are 10.5 point or 11 point favorites against Syracuse. I wouldn't, like we were saying about Miami.
It's on the road.
It's a road game, and Miami has been playing with fire all year again. And Syracuse is not all that bad. I think they're an 8-3 team. They're
I think they're a 3-loss team. Kyle McCord on the offense has been, firing on all cylinders. So that's going to be an interesting matchup that we're going to get to later in the show.
And Miami's defense is terrible. Miami's defense is terrible. I've said it many times. Alabama and Miami are very similar teams. Both very overly reliant on the quarterback. Don't play good. They don't play.
The only difference is Cam Ward is much better and more consistent than Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, but I would say
Milroe made last week, and I was like, "What is this guy doing?" I mean, those were like elementary interceptions the guy had. I mean, it was like some of those he threw were just like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
did you see the pick six where he basically made no attempt on trying to tackle the defender? He let the defender run right past him.
Yeah, and also getting blown out by Oklahoma. Oklahoma is so bad. They fired their offensive coordinator in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
That's how bad they were
out in college football.
And by the way, you know what team is still ranked? Missouri. They're number 21. They moved up.
Missouri being ranked it still doesn't make any sense to me.
Eli Drinkwitz have like nudes of like committee members or something? Like, is he black?
I've never understood why Missouri has stayed ranked this whole time. They haven't.
You would think Eli Drinkwitz is blackmailing the committee.
Their 3 losses are all blowouts. Like, they haven't proven anything.
It's their
best win right now. I mean, I guess they just lost to South Carolina really close, but I mean, their best win right now is either Vanderbilt or Boston College at home.
Yeah, and they beat Vanderbilt in overtime. Vanderbilt took them to OT.
Yeah,
and
so
the reason is fairly obvious, and I think it's really because they were ranked so high in the beginning that I think in the beginning of the season. I mean, not that it matters at that point after the 12th or basically after the playoffs when it comes to rankings. Okay, I do want to move on to talk about some of this recruiting news. Juju Lewis committed to Colorado, and Bryce Underwood committed to Michigan. They both flipped. Juju Lewis was at USC. And Bryce Underwood, LSU. I got that right. Okay. These are both star high school players. I don't know a ton about them because I don't follow high school football very much. But I think that with Michigan, I think this could be a pretty big deal for Michigan for sure, because possibly
Absolutely.
a bigger deal than it would be for Colorado. Michigan, the problem with Michigan so far has been their lack of a quarterback. And look, I don't know how good Bryce Underwood is going to be, but he is one of the top recruits. He's a 5-star recruit.
Yeah.
So Michigan getting a quarterback could be a huge thing.
Yeah, put it this way, Nick. I mean, stay up to date with high school football, and Bryce Underwood's pretty much been like the freshman of the year in Max Preps. He's been the sophomore of the year, junior of the year, so he's pretty much been the best player in high school almost every year he's played. And he's big. He's got a strong arm. He's pretty much the total package. People that really follow recruiting, the recruiting experts, are saying he might be the best quarterback to come out of high school since Trevor Lawrence. And Juju Lewis was also very ranked high. The ESPN has him as the second overall player, and he's been a great player who actually reclassified. He was supposed to be in the class of 2026 and decided to come out early. So we got two young guys. Juju Lewis is born September of 2007. Bryce Underwood also born 2007. Both young guys who are probably going to be counted on very early. I think Bryce Underwood, with the talent that he'll have with Michigan, I think will be very crucial. Now with Juju Lewis going to Colorado, I think this kind of shows that Deion Sanders is probably going to stay at Colorado. I don't think Juju Lewis would be going to Colorado if Deion Sanders was going to be going to the NFL like all the rumors stated. I think he's going to stay in college. He loves coaching young men, and I think Juju Lewis could continue that lineage that Shedeur Sanders has. I think Juju Lewis is an accurate quarterback that could just be a good distributor of football. You know, Deion's going to recruit speedy receivers to go along with them. So I think this is a great thing for both universities.
Well, let me just say, that doesn't mean Deion Sanders isn't going to go to the NFL or go to Florida State, or it doesn't mean he's going to stay at Colorado. It means Juju Lewis thinks he's going to stay at Colorado. That's what it really means.
Right.
You have to remember, college football coaches are the least loyal people on earth. I don't know if you know the story about Tommy Tuberville. When he was the head coach at Texas Tech, there was a report that he was eating lunch with recruits, and he left them in the middle of lunch because to accept the Cincinnati job. Literally was eating lunch with them and left in the middle of it. So, you know, they probably thought Tommy Tuberville was going to stay at Cincinnati, those recruits, and then he literally left them when they were eating together. So you never, it doesn't mean that. Deion Sanders probably assured him that he was going to stay at Colorado. It doesn't mean he's actually going to stay at Colorado.
Yeah. I will say this too, and I'm pretty sure this proves that NIL is quite a big deal in this modern age. To flip these guys from programs like USC and LSU, I mean, like, where I'm pretty sure money talks here, and obviously don't know the exact numbers, but these guys have to be getting paid a nice penny to be able to be flipping to these schools. I have a feeling that more than likely, based off the fact that Shedeur is going to go to the NFL and that Michigan, the quarterback room is a dumpster fire at the moment, these guys are probably going to be the starters as soon as they come in. I think that you know it's one of these things that these guys are highly touted guys out of high school for good reason. I mean, they're both phenomenal. I think that these guys are going to come in and try to make their programs better right off the bat. I mean, kind of like a Dylan Raiola deal. Obviously, these guys are both more highly touted than Raiola was, but you know, just these guys they're going to come in, and I'm pretty sure Deion probably told them, like, look, you'll be our starter after Shedeur leaves, which will be after this year. And then for Michigan, it's kind of a no-brainer to start a guy like Bryce Underwood right away. It's a no-brainer. I mean,
because
you might as well get the guy acclimated to the system right away, even if he's only going to be there for, well, I guess to go to the NFL, you got to be there for 3 years. But yeah, it's just, you might as well get the guy acclimated to the system right away. And especially because I don't think Michigan really has anything else working for it right now at the quarterback position. So yeah, I think both these guys are going to come in and be the starters right away after making some nice NIL money to flip and go to those schools.
Well, the Michigan quarterback situation is such a disaster. I mean, you have their best quarterback, I would say, Jack Tuttle, retired. So he had to retire because of all these concussions. And then the other two remaining guys. Yeah, and then the other two remaining guys, one guy can't throw at all. and the other guy only throws to the other team. So it is basically the worst quarterback situation imaginable.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, it's terrible. It's like I said, it's a dumpster fire. So like,
Bryce Underwood is getting $10.5 million over 4 years.
wow, that's quite a number. That's quite a number.
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Now, let me ask you guys. You guys were saying about
four-year
flipping from big
contract in college.
programs.
How about that?
What's that?
You guys were saying from flipping from big programs. Honestly, in my opinion, if I was a quarterback, I feel like going to Michigan at this point might be better than going to LSU. What would you guys say on that?
Yeah, maybe. You for sure have the starting job right away, more than likely. So
it depends on NIL. It depends on NIL money. Is how I would do it. I mean, both are very good programs historically. I mean, this year LSU was much better than Michigan. I would say this year LSU is much better than Michigan.
Oh yeah, I mean, you put them on a field together. LSU wins by 3 or 4 scores.
LSU would be, if they played at a neutral site, LSU would maybe be a 10-point favorite. If
I would even lean 14.5, 17.5. Michigan
maybe even higher.
Michigan's not good. Michigan's not good. I mean, they're going to finish 6-6. So,
but the point is, they're both very big programs.
Yes,
and Bryce Underwood grew up in Michigan, so I feel like he always kind of wanted to go to Michigan. I'm not sure, what made him go to LSU early on. But now he gets to stay in his hometown. He gets a lot of money. I know you were saying that LSU has been a better team, but a lot of that has to do because Michigan had no quarterback.
Right.
If they had a better quarterback, maybe they are just as good as LSU, if not better.
Yeah,
right. Like maybe if you put Garrett Nussmeier on Michigan and say Warren Davis at LSU is then one of the worst teams in the SEC. If you switch quarterbacks.
Yeah. It's a good point.
I mean, both programs are pretty big, but ultimately I think it's the money. I mean, if you think about it though, flipping from USC to Colorado is more shocking than anything. Because USC and Colorado, in terms of brands, don't even compare.
No.
They don't even compare. I mean,
Colorado's that's what I was saying about like the whole Deion Sanders thing. Obviously, just the name alone, Colorado is a huge brand at this point now because of Deion. And
yeah, only because of
the NIL money has just kind of poured in since he's come there.
But the question is, when he leaves, and he will leave eventually, not necessarily this year, but he will Colorado go back into oblivion? Because that could happen too.
Yeah, you have no idea. You have no idea because obviously Colorado was the worst Power 5 program at the time. They were the worst Power 5 program before he came in. I mean, they were. Yeah, it was either them or Northwestern 2 years ago. Both teams finished 1-11. So
Colorado was probably worse. 2 years ago at this time, they were kind of like what the Chicago White Sox were of college football.
Hey man, come on now.
They were historically bad. Mack Brown got fired at North Carolina. If you saw this story, Mack Brown is now done. It's kind of strange to me how he built what he was able to do at Texas, and now he just can't keep a job. It seems like. I remember when he got fired at Texas, and I don't know. I guess he hasn't adjusted. It's not even really NIL stuff. It's way before that. Mack Brown just hasn't adjusted as a head coach.
Yeah.
Since he was at Texas.
Yeah, I mean, his teams are competitive. I mean, but they're just not like winning at the level that you'd want a Mack Brown or a North Carolina. I mean, 6-7 wins is not getting it done. North Carolina has higher standards than that. And Mack Brown, he's been coaching. He's been doing this thing for a long time. I think he should just, retire, which I think is what he's going to, step away and maybe get in the TV like we see with Nick Saban.
I mean, yeah. I think it seems. I could totally see that happening. Him going into TV, and by the way, going into TV way easier than being a college football coach.
Oh yeah, I mean Nick Saban's thriving in college. Yeah, and he's almost. I mean him and Pat McAfee. That interaction has been phenomenal. But I will say, I always thought it was a weird hire at first because Mack Brown. It seemed like he was done with coaching after Texas, because I mean he even said that he was done with coaching, but then he came back and did this North Carolina thing, and it's not like he didn't have teams that could succeed. I mean, he coached quarterbacks like Drake May, Mitch Trubisky, guys like that. It's like he had quarterbacks that were made to thrive at Sam Howell. I mean, he had quarterbacks that were made to thrive in North Carolina and good teams. I mean, there were some really good offensive teams that he has coached at North Carolina, but they were never really able to get to that next level. I mean, they made a couple ACC championship games, but they were never really able to just they never
because they were
like
because
Clemson.
they were on the weak half of the ACC.
Yeah, I mean they were in that worst division, but I'm just saying like they were never able to get past the win the conference or anything like that. So it's not like North Carolina had high expectations for football, so to say. But when you have a coach like Mack Brown, who was so successful at Texas for the time he was there, before obviously the latter years where they were on a decline, but during like the mid 2000s, early 2000s, I mean, Texas was damn near a top 10 team every year. And
when they became a joke.
Right. They did. Yeah. And, I kind of find it interesting how like they thought that, North Carolina football is going to be so relevant now that we're hiring Mack Brown. Well, you've had him for a lot of years now, and now it never panned out. So yeah, it's just, I also think I'm sure he was probably getting to a point where it's like he was probably done too, but in North Carolina probably sensed that. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting situation, but yeah.
I also think when James Madison drops 70 points on you, I think you might need a change.
That's also a good point.
Yeah. I want to get into some picks. Texas minus 5.5 at Texas A&M. I'll tell you, this is a really big game when it comes to playoff implications. I don't know exactly what the tiebreaker is. If Texas A&M, I know Georgia's automatically in. I don't know if Texas.
I think the winner of this game goes into the championship.
The winner of this game.
Okay. The winner of this game. Oh,
Yep.
That makes sense because Ole Miss and Alabama both lost.
The winner of this game.
So whoever wins this has a tiebreaker over Tennessee, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So the winner of this game goes to the SEC championship game. Forget about the game. I think even if Texas A&M beats Texas, basically that would mean Texas is out because their schedule has not been strong enough.
I agree.
And Texas A&M would have to win the championship game in order to actually go to the playoffs because their schedule, their resume would not have been good enough. They would already be a 3-loss team. So I think that would actually just eliminate another SEC team if Texas A&M wins. And I'll say I still really like Texas to cover the spread. I think it'll be close at some point. Like I think there will be. I think that there will be. A&M will give them some trouble because they are the home team in Texas A&M. I think they were looking ahead of Auburn to play Texas, but from the way I think Texas A&M seems like a very undisciplined team. They seem to be very undisciplined. I mean, it's just look at all these look-ahead games they've had, like how bad they played against Auburn and South Carolina. I do like Texas. I like their quarterback play better. I think Texas really has all the pieces. I like Texas to win by like a touchdown. Yeah, I'm right with you, Nick. I think Texas is going to go out there. They really need to have that marquee win, that ranked matchup, and I think they're the better team. And I think stylistically, this is a bad matchup for Texas A&M. I know they got Marcel Reed. They like to run the ball, and I think Texas's defense can kind of, neutralize that. I think Quinn Ewers can play good football and not turn the ball over. So I think Texas will win and cover. But I do think if Texas A&M goes out there and pulls off the upset, that causes, I think, a lot of chaos for the committee because now you've got a 3-loss team. And we talked about this last week, Nick. You were saying how you have a tough time imagining a team going to the conference championship game, losing, and not making the playoffs. Well, this is the scenario right here. If Texas A&M wins and then loses to Georgia, you're going to have an SEC runner-up not make the playoffs, and which rightfully so. I mean, you can't put Texas A&M win if they do, win this game and then lose to Georgia. But I think it just caused a lot of chaos, and I think for the committee, it would just be much easier if Texas could just take care of business.
Yeah. First off, I will say, as a college football fan, I am so pumped that this matchup is back. It's the first time these two are playing since 2011, and this is going to be an electric.
Have they not played at all since then?
Like, what's that?
They haven't played once since then?
Nope. First time since 2011 they'll be playing each other. So, I personally think that Texas A&M. And also, we got to keep in mind that Quinn Ewers is banged up right now, so we're not fully sure of how healthy he is going to be for this game, even if he will play at all. We're not even sure yet. I think that this is going to be a game that is incredibly close the entire time, and if Texas A&M doesn't actually beat them, they will cover. I just think I think that this is going to cause so much chaos in the SEC. I think Texas A&M is going to win this game, and I think that Texas A&M was like, they were looking past Auburn, like Anthony said. They lost that game, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got Texas at home now. Time to win what will be. I guess they're not fully eliminated from the national championship, but like if they beat Texas, like that is like the height of their season, obviously. So I think Texas A&M is going to defend Kyle Field, and I think they're going to beat Texas. I think it's going to be really close, and it might even be like on a game-winning field goal or something like that, kind of how they beat Alabama a handful of years back, but. I don't know. This just kind of spells that for disaster. And I do want to ask you guys a quick question: a 9-3 Alabama or a 10-2 Texas? Who goes?
I was just thinking that. Okay, so who would I take? You know what? I don't think Texas really has a good resume.
That's what I'm saying.
As a 10-2 team. I mean, I personally would say I would probably say 9-3 Alabama, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think this is going to happen.
Like, you have to have the conversation, because that becomes like a Florida State Alabama conversation last year. You know?
I would possibly say a 9-3. Actually, I wouldn't even say that. I would say a 9-3 Ole Miss team is who I would take.
Okay.
Over a 10-2 Texas team, because Texas has not had a good resume. No. How many top 25 teams have they even beaten?
None.
I don't think they've beaten any. I don't think Texas. I can double check, but I don't think they've beaten.
Was Vandy ranked when they beat Vandy?
I can't remember if
Vandy was ranked then.
They may have been ranked at the time. I'm not sure, but they're not ranked now.
No, they're not.
I would go with Alabama. I mean, Alabama has that real impressive win against Georgia. Georgia obviously blew out Texas. Obviously, Texas did beat Vanderbilt, who did beat Alabama. But that game for Texas, I think, was pretty close.
Yeah, it was.
It was, but also the thing is, I would put Ole Miss, because Ole Miss, they also beat Georgia in a more impressive win. They beat South Carolina in a more impressive win.
That's true. Good point.
So I like Ole Miss's resume better, whereas Alabama got killed by Oklahoma. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky by a small margin. I think Ole Miss is a better team than Alabama right now, and I would put Ole Miss ahead of Texas.
I don't disagree.
And Texas, like, it would be one thing if Texas beat a bunch of really good teams, but they really haven't been tested very much. Now, I'm not saying I think Texas is not a good team. I think Texas is a good team. But, okay, Vandy was 25. All right, so.
So they had a ranked win. It's not currently still a ranked win, but it was a ranked win.
Yeah, so I guess that's something. And
also, I want to point something out real fast about talking about resumes here. They called a key win for Texas at Arkansas, but called a bad loss for Tennessee at Arkansas. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can't have it both ways.
I don't know. But, yeah. I like the Aggies.
That would be crazy.
Marcel Reed, lead us to victory.
But it would be like the most. It would be like the most great. It would happen this year. If it were to happen at all, it would happen this year.
I just kind of feel like it would be the best cherry on top for the season.
Yeah. Kind of how I feel. All right. South Carolina at Clemson. The thing is, South Carolina has been the ultimate spoiler team. They really have been the ultimate spoiler team. What Vegas is telling you with this line, given that they're playing at Clemson, is they are even. 2.5 points at home is even. These teams are exactly even. And South Carolina, they seem to really be up for these games, and they've been playing pretty well lately. And they could have, if Lenore Sellers didn't get hurt against LSU, they would be in the playoff conversation, because they'd be a 2-loss team. And Clemson, their schedule has not been great. When they finally played Louisville, they got trounced in their own stadium. And I don't know how much I believe in Clemson. I think South Carolina is going to win this outright. I think South Carolina is going to end up winning this outright. I totally see it.
Yeah, it's a very close game. For me, I think if it was South Carolina was the home team, I go with South Carolina. I think they do play better at home. Lenore Sellers has been improving as a passer, and if his passing is on point, they're going to be tough to beat, because that's literally their only weakness right now. I think Clemson's defense will be able to force Sellers into some turnovers. I think Clay Kubnik will do pretty good against South Carolina's dominant defensive line and defense. I think he'll make a couple touchdown throws. So give me Clemson to win and cover, but barely.
Yeah, I'm a big Lenora Sellers fan. I do like the Gamecocks in this one. Like Nick was saying, Vegas is pretty much saying they're even teams, and I tend to I actually think South Carolina is the better team, just based off like
they might be
and everything like that. I think South Carolina is the better team overall, and I think that's going to prove on Saturday. I think Lenora Sellers is a really good game. I think that dominant defensive line, like Anthony was saying, that South Carolina has, is going to give Kate Klubnik some troubles, and I think that it's going to be a really close game. It's going to be a tight fight, a rivalry game, obviously gritty. Both sides are going to want it just as badly as the other side wants it, but give me the Gamecocks on the road.
All right. Kansas State at Iowa State. Iowa State's giving 2.5. I really like Iowa State because
Farmageddon.
What's that?
Farmageddon.
Farmageddon. I think Kansas State is overrated. They're not good on the road, and I think that like their whole resume is very shaky. They're only ranked 20 as high as they are because their schedule is easy. And I think Iowa State is gonna look. This game is just a pick 'em, basically. Iowa State's the home team. Kansas State does not have it hasn't been a good road team, and sometimes Kansas State really just lays an egg, like they did against Houston. And I like Iowa State in this.
Yeah, I agree, Nick. I like Iowa State as well to win and cover. Kansas State's been very inconsistent. I think Avery Johnson, their quarterback situation, has put them in a lot of bad situations. I think DJ Gibbons, the running back, has been trying to carry their offense as much as he can. Iowa State dropping those back-to-back games. Now that Colorado and BYU lost, they know they got a chance at making the Big 12 championship. And I think they're going to go out there and try to prove something, knowing they're one win away and still have playoff hopes alive. So I'm going to trust Rico Beck to have a better game than whoever Kansas State has in Avery Johnson. So give me Iowa State to win and cover.
Yeah, I like the Cyclones here too. I think Kansas State is they don't really even deserve to be ranked in my opinion. Kansas State's such an odd team. I mean, coming into the season, they were supposed to be atop the Big 12 and probably even win it. I don't know. I just don't really like how they've played this season. On the road, Iowa State. I think the Cyclones will get the job done and cover at home.
All right, and then we have Michigan and Ohio. Michigan at Ohio State. The game. This is the worst game we've seen in probably a decade. When's the last time one of these teams was favored by 20 points?
Well, I want to say that Ohio State, I mean, I know that, what year was it? Was it 2018 or 2019 when
they weren't favored by that much?
When Ohio State they weren't favored by that much in that game?
They were never, I mean, they have won by this much.
I know they ran them. I know the game was over by halftime.
But they were never favored by this much.
Yeah. I guess if we would have seen a line like that, we probably would have remembered it, right?
Which goes to show you how lopsided it is.
Yeah.
I like Ohio State to run up the score and win by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Michigan just doesn't have it this year. Ohio, and not only that, but they're playing at the Shoe, and Ohio State is really coming into form. I really think that they're coming into form right now. I think that they struggled a little bit earlier in the year. Now I really think they're finding their identity, and I think they're going to win this by like 3 or 4 touchdowns. So at least 21 points, probably even more.
Yeah, I absolutely love Ohio State as well to win and cover. I don't think this game's going to be close. I said preseason Ohio State was going to be my team to win it all. I said that they would drop against Oregon, and then they were going to fire on all cylinders after that. And so far, if you look at this matchup, this is probably one of the best Ohio State teams we've had in a long time, and this is probably one of the worst Michigan teams we've had. And we know Ryan Day, he hasn't beaten Michigan in the last few years. So there's a lot of pressure. I mean, Ohio State has to win this game. I mean, if Ryan Day drops this game, I know, they're going to make the playoffs and everything, but there are going to be fans out there that say you have to fire them because you have to beat Michigan. And if there's a year to beat Michigan, you have to beat them this year. You're the much better team. You have the much better players. You're the home team. You cannot lose this game. And I think the players know that. They've been very pissed off that Michigan's beat them the last few years. And they're going to come in here, and this is probably going to be the best Ohio State team you've seen all year. So give me Ohio State big.
All right.
Yeah, I like the This game is, I think it's a little slow. I think both sides are going to like kind of just start to feel each other out at first, because Michigan obviously is coming off a dominant win. I mean, Northwestern is not a good football team. I think we can all safely say that. But Michigan is coming off a dominant win over Northwestern last weekend. And so is Ohio State, I guess, to be fair, too. But I think this game's going to start a little close, and it might even be like only a touchdown, 10-point game going into halftime. But too much Buckeyes in the second half, and I think the Buckeyes do end up covering this one pretty easily. I could see like a 35-10 final score, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that too.
I think it's going to to be too much Buckeyes in this one. And I do real fast too. I like the Buckeyes to win the Big Ten right now as well.
All right, over Oregon. I mean, that's going to be a very.
I like them to win the rematch on a neutral field.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Oklahoma State at Colorado. Colorado is giving 16.5. I really like Colorado because Oklahoma State has nothing to play for. They might be the worst team in the Big 12 this year. They usually get blown out in these games. Colorado is coming off a tough loss. This is a get-right game for them, and they have a shot at making the Big 12 championship. So I like Colorado. The only thing, one of my concerns is that if their defense plays like they did last week, but Oklahoma State is so bad, and Colorado should be able to cover 16.5. I think Colorado blows them out.
Yeah, we've seen the story with Colorado this year. If they stop the run, they win. If they don't, they lose. They lost to Kansas State because they couldn't stop DJ Gibbons. They lost to Kansas because they couldn't stop Devin Neal. This is definitely going to be a bounce-back game. I think they'll be able to shut down Oklahoma State because they don't really have much going for them. I knew they do have Ollie Gordon, but Ollie Gordon doesn't have a lot of support around him.
Ollie Gordon hasn't done anything this year.
Yeah, but it's also because he doesn't have any help around him, so they're stacking the box. So, I mean, if you got no passing game, I mean, you could put 8, 9-man guys in the box, and how's Ollie Gordon going to run on a 9-man box? So I think Colorado knows that. They're going to bounce back. They're going to stop the run. Like you said, if BYU and Iowa State loses, Colorado could be in the Big 12 championship. So they got a lot to play for. So give me Colorado to winning cover.
Yeah, I think that this is going to spell for a really nice win for Colorado. Obviously, they incredibly disappointed for them what happened last week in Kansas City. I guess not Lawrence, in Kansas City. I did think last week that was a trap. Not a trap game, but a tricky game, and it ended up being a very tricky game, obviously, because Devin Neal had one of the best performances of a player we've seen this entire season alone. Yeah, I think that Oklahoma State is incredibly one-dimensional, and there's only one way to stop that, and that's by what Anthony said: just load the box, don't let out Ollie Gordon do anything, and he hasn't been able to this entire season. So I don't know. I don't think Oklahoma State poses much of a challenge to them. I'll take Colorado with the points.
All right, Notre Dame at USC. That extra half a point scares me. I like USC to cover, but not to win. This is a rivalry game. I think USC is sort of in fuck it mode, I guess you could say. I mean, they might make a bowl. They'll make a bowl game, but I think that Notre Dame is going to struggle in this game. It just feels like it would be the most Notre Dame thing to end up losing this game after resurrecting their entire reputation and playoff hopes, to just lose this game. I think they're going to win, but I think USC is going to make it close, actually. I think it's going to be, and I think USC will be winning at halftime. And then in typical USC fashion, they can't play 60 minutes of football, and they're going to end up losing. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm right with you, Nick. USC, all their games and all their losses have been really close. I mean, if their one-possession games would have went the other way, maybe they're talking about being in the playoffs. I mean, this team has been pretty good. They just can't close out games, and that's why they benched Miller Moss and went with Jaden Mavia. He's helping them finish games and close out games, but I don't think he'll be able to close out this game. So I'm going to go Notre Dame to win, but no cover.
Yeah, this is obviously just a good old-fashioned rivalry game too. I mean, once again, rivalry week, so it's not surprising this one's being played this week, as it usually does. It would be the most Notre Dame thing to have an upset happen here. It really would be. And honestly, as I've kind of always been a Notre Dame hater in a sense, so I would kind of love to see this happen. But I just think Notre Dame's playing too well. I don't know. I think Marcus Freeman's a really good coach. If it was Brian Kelly, I think I'd be picking USC. But No, I think that I think Notre Dame stays up by like a score or two the entire game and is able to cover in this one. So I'll take the Irish plus the points.
All right. Iron Bowl, Auburn at Alabama. Alabama's giving 11.5.
Tough.
This is tough because I'm a little torn on this because on one hand, Alabama's coming off a tough loss and Auburn's coming off a great win. The flip side is it is a rivalry game. Alabama is a much better team than Auburn. I still think Alabama still technically has a shot at making the playoffs. They're just going to need a lot of help. My gut is telling me Alabama's going to win this. Although I think it's going to be, I think that they're going to struggle, but I think they'll come up. I think they'll end up taking off at the end, and I think they'll cover the 11.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go Alabama no cover. It's a rivalry game. Auburn's got a lot of freshmen and sophomores on their team, and that's why you see their team struggle in the beginning and play so well now. A lot of those freshmen and sophomores are stepping up. Cam Coleman, wide receiver, he's going to be a superstar. And Alabama has a tough loss. Deontay Lawson, their starting inside linebacker, was looking like a potential first-round NFL draft pick. As soon as he went out the game, Alabama even struggled even more to stop the run, and that's why Oklahoma ran all over him. I think Auburn will be able to run the ball out on him, which is going to open it up for all those freshman receivers. So that's why I'm going to go Alabama here in a close no cover.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put it simply put, Iron Bowl, Auburn's going to cover. It's going to be closer than 11.5. Alabama's probably going to end up winning by maybe a field goal or a touchdown, and it might even be late in the game. I think that Auburn is going to be riding high off that win over Texas A&M. They have all the momentum in the world. Alabama has to look itself in the mirror and figure out what the hell happened last weekend. And you're not going to find the answer this week in a rivalry game against your hated opponent. So Iron Bowl, close game. Alabama barely wins. So I like Auburn to cover this one.
All right. Miami at -11 at Syracuse. I hate how much I love Syracuse to cover the spread. Miami, they have had we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. Miami has had a lot of close calls. Their defense stinks. They give up a lot of points. They're very overly reliant on Cam Ward. On top of that, they're playing at Syracuse. Miami has a lot of pressure on them because they lose this game. Their season's probably over. Unless Clemson also loses, and then maybe it wouldn't be. I like Syracuse to cover. I don't like Miami to win this game by more than like one score. They could win, but not by more than a score. They haven't been good enough lately.
Yeah, I'll take it one step further, Nick. I'm going to go full upset. I think Syracuse is going to not only make sure the point spread's not covered, but I think they're going to go out and win the game. Miami, they have a lot of shootouts, and their defense is not that good. And you don't want to have a shootout against Kyle McCord and Syracuse. Usually when Kyle McCord and Syracuse struggles, it's usually when McCord is forcing interceptions. I don't know if Miami's defense is capable of forcing Kyle McCord interceptions. So I think it's going to be a back and forth game. And I think Kyle McCord is going to be able to make a few more plays. And I think Syracuse defense might make a play late where Miami's defense doesn't. So give me Kyle McCord and Syracuse to upset Miami and knock them completely out of the playoffs.
This feels like a type of game that Miami will definitely be playing with fire again. Syracuse has a chance to become a 9-win football team if they win this game. I mean, Kyle McCord he's been very good for Syracuse. I mean, it seems like it's been a very good fit. I know he has 12 interceptions on the year too, but it seems like it's been a very good fit. I mean, 26 touchdowns, and I don't know. I mean, this feels like it's going to be a back and forth battle because Syracuse can score points too. So could Syracuse end up outscoring Miami? Sure, I could see it. I do think that this is going to be one of those games that even though it is playing with fire, Miami does squeak it out, and it's still going to create a big, big controversy about, I mean, it's going to set up the SMU Miami ACC championship where the winner loses, the loser's out. But I don't know. I think this sets up a very interesting kind of scenario in the ACC. And yeah, I think this is going to be a tight-knit game. Miami plays with fire the entire time and barely squeaks it out. So the bet for me would be Syracuse to cover.
All right. Tennessee -10.5 at Vanderbilt. That half a point scares me. Yeah,
that is a tricky half a point, isn't it?
The thing is, Vanderbilt has not Vanderbilt has kind of cooled off a bit.
Yeah,
right?
Sadly.
They've kind of Vanderbilt's kind of cooled off a bit. They just got killed by South Carolina. They struggled a bit against Auburn. I think, but it's still a rivalry game. They're playing on the road. I like Vanderbilt to cover, but Tennessee to win.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really trust Tennessee's offense. I know Dylan Sampson's unbelievable and Nico Iamaleava has been improving, but I think it's going to, their defense is going to carry them against Diego Pavia. And I just think that's way too many points for their offense to try to score. So give me Tennessee no cover.
Yeah, this is tricky. Because Vanderbilt, obviously, they just gave LSU a tough deal on the road, but I don't know. LSU is obviously not very good. Yeah, this is interesting. I'm just trying to look back at Vanderbilt's schedule. I mean, for the most part at home, they have done a great job at covering. Besides, obviously, the game they only beat Ball State by 10 points. But Tennessee is fighting for its playoff lives right now. They have to – I mean, Tennessee, if you win, you're in for sure. They're not going to be left out of 10-2. And I think they could honestly use a nice convincing win over a rival to say, like, hey, we deserve to be in. I do like Dylan Sampson's a phenomenal running back. I have a feeling that Vanderbilt's going to struggle to score in this one. And I think that this could be a low scoring kind of grinded out win for Tennessee where they do end up barely covering. So I will take Tennessee to cover with the points in this one. I do like the Volunteers.
I like Tennessee to win this like 17-7.
I could totally take that. I could very well see that.
Which technically would be a cover. All right, finally. Georgia Tech at Georgia. Georgia minus 19.5. I love Georgia to cover this. I think they win by 3 touchdowns or more. I think that Georgia is out for blood. I would put it. They're a much better team than Georgia Tech. This is a game that Georgia just kills them in.
Yeah, I agree. I think Carson Beck's going to have a decent game. Since they've been using the tight ends more, Carson Beck has been playing a little bit better. Georgia Tech can't really throw the ball consistently, and I think Georgia's defense is going to be able to suffocate and completely take out Georgia Tech's running game. So give me Georgia to win and cover.
Yeah, I'll just go quick here. Dogs all day. I'm not worried about this one. I mean, I think they're going to lock up Haynes King. He's not going to be able to do anything. I mean, he still barely can even throw the ball. So as long as they stop the run, they won't have a problem. And I think Georgia's run defense will have no problem at all being able to stop Georgia Tech. So give me the Dogs all day. All
right. So finally, we're about to end the show, and another edition of Unnecessary Wagers. So I have the over 65 in Oklahoma State, Colorado, Wisconsin minus 1.5. Trey Harris is an anytime touchdown scorer in the Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. Iowa money line against Nebraska. Raheem Sanders is an anytime touchdown scorer against Clemson. Kansas money line against Baylor. Kansas is a hot team now. Alabama minus 6.5 first half spread. Penn State minus 25 against Maryland. The over 58.5 in the TCU Cincinnati game. Florida minus 16.5 at Florida State. LSU minus 6 against Oklahoma. And Texas minus 0.5 point first quarter spread against Texas A&M.
Why not?
That Baylor-Kansas game is going to be wild. You said Kansas is on a hot streak, but so is Baylor. So that's going to be an interesting game.
They're both on hot streaks, I guess.
Aren't both them fighting for bowl eligibility, or Baylor already get it?
I think Baylor's got it, but Kansas doesn't.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, so that's our show today. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. This is Forever Power 5. I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Will Charlton. That's Anthony Balester. And we'll be back next week.